When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
You can also add custom questions, right? And so you can consider like what custom questions you're asking. Is this really relevant to this process? Can I improve this process? Can I get people through here faster so that their application is completed and I can get a decision out to them? So stuff like that. So I love that that framing. And with that, I think we're going to look at a few of the trends that we find in this end of year report from Common App. And with that, I'll kick it over to you, Jamie. What do we got?
I mean, you called this piece out, and I think it's super important. You and I have somewhat a background in marketing, so this certainly speaks to me, and I think it speaks to a lot of I don't know. We often think about what are we doing on social media, what are we doing here, there. Web content continues to be super important. I think it gets neglected sometimes because we focus on what's new and hip, and like saying hip is new and hip.
Welcome to the EduData Podcast, a podcast that serves as your weekly guide to the data driving higher education. We are your hosts. I'm Jamie Boggs.
And I'm Timothy Davis. Join us every Friday for weekly breakdowns of the most important data, trends, and topics in higher education.
The EduData Podcast is a part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below.
Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of the EduData Podcast. I'm Timothy Davis, joined by Jamie Boggs. Hey, Jamie.
Timothy, what is happening?
It's happening. It for sure. We're in football season now. That's always like the start of fall, right? Football season's back.
Popular episodes was our March Madness bracket of how that impacts the application process for schools in the Final Four. This opens a lot of doors for us. The playoff is expanded to 12 teams instead of 4. How's that going to impact applications? I look forward to digging in.
Mm-hmm. And we'll also just like cover some like sick highlights, you know what I mean? Like cool catches and like stiff arms and stuff like that. So
we'll see if we can get Deion Sanders on here to talk about it.
For sure. Yeah. We'll get some of the big celebrity guests. You know, they're beating down the direct messages on LinkedIn trying to get on the show, and you know, we're just trying to find the time, you know, work out the contracts, stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We want to make sure they're informed as well, and they help us inform you. And today we're going to get informed about some Common App trends.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of pulling the rug out from people who are looking forward to a sports show. We're actually talking about Common App today.
We'll get to sports at some point.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's a teaser.
Yeah, exactly. It's a teaser. But today, yes, we are talking about the Common App. Common App recently released its end of season trends report as it wraps up the 2024 fall season, spring and fall season. And I came across a post on LinkedIn from Robert McGuire, a writer and marketer in the higher ed space. Really great LinkedIn follow. I love shouting out great LinkedIn accounts and people to follow on LinkedIn here on this show. Robert is definitely on that list. So thank you, Robert, for all of your great content. And he pulled out some of the stats from this, but near the bottom of his post, and this is how I want to kind of frame this conversation. Robert says this, I'm going to just kind of read from his post, which brings me to SEO. He says, when I look at Common App, I see a search engine that can be used in a more or less optimal way. Colleges, remember to look at the flow through your account on the Common App and think about where you're leaking applications. And I think that is a great way to consider Common App, to frame and think about Common App. And so when he says SEO, that's search engine optimization. In marketing, that's a pretty big deal. So basically, it's the idea that your website, your institution's website, can rank higher in Google searches or appear closer to the top of Google searches by optimizing your website for that search engine. So Google is looking for, as it indexes the internet, looking for information that will distinguish certain sites as high value, having good content, not being written by bots or not being spammy, not having, too many ads or too many paid promotions, or just being low quality information, right? And so as people go to Google and query, ask their question, be it a few phrases or a full-blown question now, Google pulls from its index to try to answer that question as best as possible, and it provides its search results, right? That's the search engine. And you can do better or worse in that engine based on the quality of your website, either the way that it is built, like so its performance. Does it load quickly? Does it use modern HTML and CSS and JavaScript standards? Or is it, something that was built in 1997 and never touched again? So that can affect the ranking, but also just like the quality of the content that you provide. And so the idea behind SEO is that you would optimize your presence on a particular platform to better rank and to be organically discovered by more folks, right? And so Robert is effectively asking or proposing that we do the same thing with Common App. Common App is a platform where your institution can be discovered, right? And have the ability to add photos of your institution, like on your institution's page. When students are considering you, they can look at what academic programs you offer, what student life and student experience opportunities you have. You can put quotes from students, right? You can basically create like a little landing page here in
Right.
Common App. And so your ability to do that, and then your ability to get people moved through the application. Are you asking too many questions? Are you, there's a standard kind of Common App flow that fits for everybody. That kind of lowers the barrier to, apply more places, right? Lowers the effort required. But you can also add custom questions, right? And so you can consider like what custom questions you're asking. Is this really relevant to this process? Can I improve this process? Can I get people through here faster so that their application is completed and I can get a decision out to them? And with that, I think we're going to look at a few of the trends that we find in this end of year report from Common App. And with that, I'll kick it over to you, Jamie. What do we got?
You called this piece out, and I think it's super important. You and I have somewhat a background in marketing, so this certainly speaks to me, and I think it speaks to a lot of I don't know. We often think about what are we doing on social media, what are we doing here, there. Web content continues to be super important. I think it gets neglected sometimes because we focus on what's new and hip, and the like saying hip is new and hip because the internet's been around for forever. But there are some stats in here that I think tell us a lot about the ability to be found in and what people are looking for in higher education within the Common App. Timothy, I was surprised by this. You were not. For the first time, and this data goes back to 2014-15, for the first time, public schools received more applications than private schools in the Common App for the first time. And the gap has been narrowing throughout. And I think you can interpret that as maybe more public schools are using it now, or public schools are just making themselves easier to find and more appealing through that search process.
Hey, it's Jamie Boggs here. Element 451 is hosting the AI Engage Summit on October 29th and 30th. This free virtual event features many of your favorite Enrollify creators and will explore AI's impact on student engagement, enrollment marketing, and institutional success. Learn how to tap into the power of AI to turn data into actionable insights, utilize predictive analytics, and monitor and support students' performance. Plus, hear directly from students on how AI is influencing their engagement and campus life. Timothy and I are hosting a session on October 29th at 2 p.m. called Predictive Analytics in Action: How Element 451 Drives Student Success with AI-Powered Insights. You don't want to miss that one. The AI Engage Summit is your guide to understanding and applying AI at your school. Registration is free. Visit element451.com to save your spot. Now, back to the show.
But you weren't surprised.
No, and I think you compare that to the number of public schools that are joining the Common App. So yes, you're getting more people on the platform, more institutions, more public institutions on the platform, more are joining up. So they're more discoverable, right? There's kind of more competition in that area, and more opportunity for students to discover public schools. But I think public schools also have, especially large public schools, have the advantage of brand recognition, right? When you've seen these school names on TV, you've seen their football teams and their basketball teams and their volleyball teams compete on ESPN or whatever. You've seen these brands before. If you're from those regions where these schools are prominent, right, it's impossible to miss them. I'm in the Lubbock, Texas area, and around here it's Texas Tech and it's Patrick Mahomes by extension. So I mean it's impossible to grow up in Lubbock and not know about Texas Tech. It is very possible to grow up in Lubbock, Texas, and not know about South Plains Community College,
Right.
which operates in Lubbock and also in the neighboring Levelland, and has a phenomenal sound engineering program. Very possible to never hear about them because they're not on TV. They don't sponsor the sports section on the news, that sort of thing. And then their teams aren't playing on ESPN. So yes, it's not surprising to me that as more public institutions join Common App, that they'll start to see more applications, especially because of the other stat that we see, that student applications are increasing. Number of applications per student is increasing because that effort required to apply is less, right? When you start an application, right, you kind of create your record in Common App. You fill out all your standard fields. Those standard fields, 80% of them are applicable to every institution that you're going to apply for. So you go to one application, you fill it out one time, and you go 100% through, and then you start your second application and you're 80% done as soon as you start, because that information just populates right over. So then you fill out that institution's custom questions and off you go. So we're seeing an increase in number of applications per student, and it's not surprising to me that more of those are going to state schools. More students are shooting their shot at the state school. Google search is an algorithmic search where it's trying to piece together semantic information to be able to produce good results in the results page. But Common App is not a semantic search engine, so you can't search affordable colleges or whatever in Common App. So you're not ranking in that way on conceptual keywords, but you can be filtered by a couple of criteria. So having a institution that is filterable on that home screen by, that you accept first year apps, that you accept transfer apps, that you're public or you're private, that you're small, medium, or large, that you're rural, suburban, urban, that you're an HBCU, or that you're a Hispanic serving institution. Those are all filters that can be applied to the search. But at this point, it actually looks like colleges are ranked alphabetically. I imagine that default A to Z filtering is going to be one Common App starts to pay attention to, because it could start to unfairly advantage schools with A or B, C names, right? Which is the same thing we saw with the grading episode. If you haven't heard our episode on, there was a study out of the University of Michigan that showed that students with last names higher ranked in the alphabet got better grades than students that had lower ranked names in the alphabet, R and down or whatever, because of fatigue, grading fatigue. So I imagine that there's a similar fatigue aspect at play here with this alphabetical search. And so while there's not a semantic search right now, I bet Common App does try to improve its search functionality to not disproportionately advantage A, B, and C named schools.
In that episode, we talked about several resolutions to that issue, but this is that's when you have 30 to 50 students in a class. Having thousands of institutions or hundreds of institutions makes it a little more challenging.
Absolutely. So the student can go in and apply regional filters, apply campus setting filters, financial aid filters, all that sort of stuff. But the default view is still very much A to Z. So we might see some changes related to that from Common App and how it starts to present schools by default. It might try to get more information about what the student's looking for, at the jump, so that it can do some better filtering. It might randomize the order in which schools appear, stuff like that, just try to be a little more equitable. But it's not all that to say, it is not an algorithmic search right now. There is still the component of that your page can be best optimized, but we're not necessarily considering, keyword search right now.
Right. But those characteristics are super important. And I think it correlates really well to this next visualization that I'm looking at. And that is about selectivity. So the more selective the institution, the less growth we see over time in those applications. So the most selective institutions have been almost flat since 2020. The next level is super small increase, but the least selective institutions has grown by almost a third since 2020, the number of applications that is. So if they're filtering by those specific characteristics of having open enrollment and all these activities and opportunity, then maybe they are getting those less selective institutions. Or maybe we're just seeing a trend in individual looking at how does that correlate with the public schools, because they are traditionally less selective than a lot of the private schools. So I think those are certainly correlated. I don't have a correlation coefficient, but I think they're certainly correlated. But also, I think it tells us a lot about what characteristics people are looking for.
Absolutely. And to kind of go along with that, test scores applying to institutions that are test optional,
Yep.
or just not reporting test scores at all from the perspective of the student, has also grown significantly since 2020. More students are applying to institutions that do not require test scores, or not uploading test scores to their record at all, and not applying to them, not applying to institutions that require them. So that's another process component that you may want to consider, in addition to fees, selectivity, all those things that students can kind of figure out about you from your Common App page. There's definitely ways to be more optimal there and increase your number of applications.
Also, an increase of in-state versus out-of-state. And for the first time in 2022-23, in-state surpassed out-of-state. So is that based on those criteria of tuition, of fees, of is there an increase for out-of-state tuition? Those are characteristics that are proving to be important for those in-state schools getting more apps. So is it more about the fees? Is it about the distance? I think with more and more online education, I would think it's less about the distance, but that's just me guessing. So
Yeah.
I would say it has more to do with the financial aspects of it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm also noticing about this report is that it is just reporting raw numbers, which can be a little bit skewed when you're also seeing growth in population quantity. So there's more students on the platform and there's more institutions on the platform year to year to year to year. So when we like compare the growth in these different things, like we have to be cognizant of how that is also just affected by a larger platform, right? So it's difficult to try to draw too many conclusions from that without like normalizing the data across those variables that we're looking at.
And I think that's super important. So let's talk about that. A way to look at I'm looking at this in-state and out-of-state chart, and it shows a rapid increase in applicants applying for both in-state and out-of-state. So that basically just tells me there's more applicants. There's been a level off of out-of-state applicants and an increase in in-state applicants. But do we know that some of the institutions in the bigger states, the more populated states, have been added? Like, that's not only do I need to know how many institutions have been added, how many more students are applying, I need to know those other characteristics. Like, are we adding a lot of institutions in California and Texas? If so, I imagine that in-state's going to go up, because you can travel 1 billion miles and still be in Texas, right? So I think there's so many factors that are underlying here. You're right that to normalize everything would almost be impossible. I think you have to begin with an end in mind to normalize the factors that are going to be important for that particular data point, because you really can't just account for everything off the top and say, all right, well, let's just click this button to make everything normalized. A little more complex than that.
You basically have to say, like, these are the subgroups that we're going to consider, and we're going to go backwards in time and calculate their percentage against the number of the subgroup, like year over year effectively, and then show the percentage change as opposed to the numerical like change, right? Because if you're increasing in students and you're increasing in institutions, yeah, you're just going to see more volume, and every chart here is showing just more volume, but it's not necessarily showing percentage change relative to where it was the prior year. So if you had X amount of students applying to So if you're looking at students that are applying to institutions that have a fee waiver versus don't, or applicants that are fee waiver eligible versus applicants that are not fee waiver eligible, right? You need to divide those groups up and show their percentage of the overall population year over year, as opposed to their just total count. And that's sort of how you go about normalizing those figures.
And even in that one, it's important to know how many institutions may have changed and dropped their fees during the course of that time. So is it more institutions? Is it a change? Are there outliers? Could the state of New York just be throwing all of this off and making the averages and trends look skewed because of what's happening in one area? So especially with this much volume, we're talking about millions of applications. So it's a lot to consider, but I think going back to our original point, it's showing that these characteristics matter. It's showing that being found in Common App for whatever kind of students you're wanting to draw, making yourself fit what they're looking for in that filter criteria is super important. And maybe we haven't looked at it that way until now, but it's a good time to revisit it.
Yeah. I mean, at the top of Robert's post, to just kind of round it off, it's a Common App is democratizing the college application process, is his take. And so when, students are using Common App primarily, and when their barrier to applying in more places is reduced by Common App, there's an opportunity cost for not being on that platform. Lots to consider there for your institution. But with that, I think we can go and wrap this episode up. Let us know what you think of Common App, and if your institution is using it, maybe if you've got some like best practices for how you've positioned your institution on Common App, what content you've added to your pages, or how you've thought about your process and communicating with your Common App applicants. If you export them from Common App and bring them into your CRM before they've even applied, or when they've just started their application as opposed to when they've submitted it, what does your process look like there? We'd love to know your thoughts. So find us there on LinkedIn, go to the Enrollify page, and you'll see our episode post. Give us a comment. We'd love to have a conversation, or just reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. We'll see you there. So thanks for listening. Hope you have a good rest of your day. We'll see you in the next episode. The EduData podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. We've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Artis Cadu, Dustin Ramsdale, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.